بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعزائي طلبة السنة الثانية, my lecture today will be about development of genital ducts and external genitalia. Last week we discussed the indifferent stage of development. In the indifferent stage, the genital system, which include the gonads, genital duct and external genitalia, their development are almost the same up to the 6 weeks of embryonic development. In the gonadal development, there will be first appearance of the genital ridge, and then the primordial germ cell will migrate from the wall of yolk sac toward this genital ridge. Then there will be formation of a primitive sex cord. After 6 weeks, in the male, there will be development of the testis, where the primitive sex cord will be changed to the testis cord or medullary cord. Toward the hilum, there will be appearance of the rete testis cord, and the testis cord is separated from the surface epithelium by tunica albuginea. Now this testis cord will take the horseshoe shape, and this testis cord will be composed of 3 types of cell. The first is called the primitive germ cell, which will give rise later to spermatogonia. The second is called Sertoli cell, and the third is called interstitial cell of Leydig, which is present between the medullary cord or testis cord, and this will secrete the testosterone that affect the genital duct development. The testis cord will be transformed and form the seminiferous tubule that will become canalized at age of puberty. In the female, there will be development of the ovary, where there is XX chromosome and there is no Y chromosome. In the development of the ovary, the primitive sex cord in the center here will be replaced by vascular stroma, and that will form the ovarian medulla. Then there will be the surface epithelium will form the cortical cord, and these cortical cord will split into isolated cell cluster. Each will be formed of one primitive germ cell, and later this will develop into oogonia, and it will be the surrounding epithelial cell will form the follicular cell, and the follicular cell with the oogonia will give rise to the primordial ovarian follicle. In the genital duct, there are also indifferent stage, similar to that of indifferent stage in the gonad. There are indifferent stage in the genital ducts, and both duct system, the Mullerian ducts, which is the paramesonephric duct, and the mesonephric ducts are present. So the 2 pairs of duct system are present in the male, and the 2 pairs of duct system are present in the female. Now look here, just to remind you, this is the mesonephric duct, and these are the mesonephric tubule. In the development of genital duct in the male, the mesonephric tubule will degenerate, and there will be exception for a few excretory tubule, and this excretory tubule is called epigenital tubule, and this will establish contact with the course of the rete testis, and finally they form efferent ductlets of the testis. Some of the tubules persist in the caudal part of the testis, and they will be called as paragenital tubule. And these paragenital tubule, not like the epigenital tubule, they do not join the course of the rete testis, and their remnant are called the paradidymas. Now look here, this is the mesonephric tubule. The mesonephric tubule, there are 2 portions. This is epigenital tubule, and this is paragenital tubule. Most of the mesonephric tubule degenerate. The epigenital tubule remain in contact with the rete testis, and they will give rise to the ducti efferentia, while the paragenital tubule, they are not in contact with the rete testis, and the paragenital tubule remnant is called paradidymas. Now this is the mesonephric tubule. Now the second part here, you can see this is the mesonephric duct. The mesonephric duct, it will persist, and it is forming the main genital duct in the male. The most cranial portion of the mesonephric duct will disappear, and the remnant of this cranial portion is called the appendix epididymas. Now the mesonephric duct, the portion which is coming directly and below the entrance of the efferent ductlet, the mesonephric ducts start to get elongated and become highly convoluted, and thus it will form the ductus epididymas. Now from the tail of epididymas, the mesonephric duct will pass here, you can see, up to the area where there are outbudding of seminal vesicle. There will be formation of the ductus deferens or vas deferens. The region where of the ducts beyond the seminal vesicle is called the ejaculatory duct. Now again we will repeat it. These are the mesonephric tubule. The mesonephric tubule, there are most of it will disappear except the epigenital tubules and the paragenital tubules. The epigenital tubules are in continuation with the rete testis, and later it will give the ducta efferentia, while the paragenital tubules are not in continuation of the rete testis, and the remnant of it is called paradidymas. Now, the most important duct in the development of genital duct in the male is the mesonephric duct. Mesonephric duct, the most cranial portion of it will disappear, and the remnant of this cranial portion that disappear of the mesonephric duct is called appendix epididymis. The mesonephric duct, this will give rise to the ductus epididymis, vas deferens, up to the area where there is outbudding of seminal vesicle, and beyond this there will be formation of ejaculatory duct. Now, the third duct which is present in the male is called paramesonephric duct, the third part. Now, this part will in the male it will degenerate, and except there are a small portion at their cranial end, and it is called the appendix testis. Now look here, this is the appendix testis. Now, to give a revision of the genital ducts in the male, we have three things we have to take in consideration. First, mesonephric tubule, and we have two ducts, the first mesonephric duct and the second paramesonephric duct. These three, the mesonephric tubule, these are the mesonephric tubule. The epigenital tubule that maintain contact with the rete testis will form the ducta efferentia. The paragenital tubule of the mesonephric tubule that are not maintaining contact with the rete testis, the remnant of it is called paradidymas. Now, the most important duct system here is the mesonephric duct. The mesonephric duct, the most apical portion or cranial portion of mesonephric duct will degenerate, and the remnant of it is called appendix epididymis. After that, the other part of the mesonephric duct is called, the first one here is epididymis, then the ductus deferens, seminal vesicle, and ejaculatory duct. The paramesonephric duct will degenerate, and the remaining part of it, one of them is called appendix testis and the other is called utricals prostaticus. Genital duct in the female. We have the mesonephric duct is the most important genital duct in the male. Here, the most important one that develop into the main genital duct in the female is paramesonephric duct. The paramesonephric duct is divided into three parts. The first part is called the cranial or vertical portion, and that will opens into the abdominal cavity. The second is called horizontal part, and this will cross the mesonephric duct. The third part is called the caudal or vertical part, and that diffuses with that of the opposite side. Now, the genital duct in the female, look here, this is the first part, which is the vertical part, and this is the horizontal part that crosses the mesonephric duct, and this will be the third part, which is also vertical and come fuse with the paramesonephric duct of the opposite side. Now look here, the first two parts, the vertical and the horizontal, they will form the uterine tube. The fused third part fused to form the uterine canal. The fused paramesonephric duct will give rise to the corpus of the uterus and cervix of the uterus. Now look here, this is the gonads, and here you can see this is the mesonephric duct, and this will be the paramesonephric or Mullerian ducts. You can see this is the vertical portion, this is the horizontal portion, this is the other vertical portion. This horizontal portion across the mesonephric duct. Now later on, the two here, the most caudal portion, they are fused together and they will form fused Mullerian duct, and the septum will remain between them, and later on there will be septum resorption or there will be formation of the uterus. The mesonephric tubules will disappear, and there are some remnants of the cranial and caudal tubule of the mesonephrics, and these may be found in the female, and they are located in mesoopharium, and they will form epiphoron and paraophoron. The mesonephric duct, this is the mesonephric duct. It will disappear, and except a small cranial portion will be found in the epiphoron, and occasionally the small caudal portion may be found in the wall of the uterus, or it may be found in the wall of the vagina, and it will form later in life a small cyst, and this is called Cartener cyst. Now look here, you can see this is the ovary, and this is the mesonephric duct, this is the mesonephric tubule, and this is the paramesonephric duct. or Mullerian duct. The paramesonephric duct will give rise to the uterine tube, to the uterus and cervix. Now look here. This mesonephric tubule will degenerate and give rise to epiphoron and paraphoron, while the mesonephric duct, the most cranial portion, will degenerate and the remnant of it will be found in the epiphoron, and the most caudal portion of the mesonephric duct might found either in the wall of the uterus or in the wall of the vagina, that will form later in life a cyst called Cartener cyst. Now the vagina. The vagina, look here, this is the vagina and this is the uterus, and there are still the septum. It is not resorbed completely at this stage, and these are the uterine tube. The vagina is formed from two sides. The first portion, which is the upper third of the vagina, it will be derived from the uterine canal, and this is the caudal tip of the paramesonephric duct. The caudal two-thirds of the vagina, they are originated from the sinovaginal pulp, and the sinovaginal pulp originate as a solid evagination of the pelvic part of the urogenital sinus. This evagination will unite and they will form the sinovaginal pulp that proliferate and form the solid vaginal plate. During the 5th month, the plate is canalized and they are forming the vagina. The wing-like expansion of the vagina, and this around the end of the uterus, is known as the vaginal fornices. The lower part is separated from the urogenital sinus by a thin tissue plate, and this is called the hymen, and usually gets a small opening during perinatal life. Now, just to revise the vagina, look here. You can see this is the vagina. It is formed from two sources. The first one is from the caudal tip of the paramesonephric duct, which form the upper third of the vagina. The lower third of the vagina is formed by the sinovaginal pulp. The sinovaginal pulp are two evaginations formed from the pelvic part of the urogenital sinus. This will later on form the vaginal plate. This vaginal plate will become canalized at the 5th month of fetal development. The wing-like expansion of the vagina, which is present around the end of the uterus, is known as the vaginal fornices. The lower part of the vagina here is separated from the urogenital sinus by a thin tissue plate, and this thin tissue plate is called the hymen, and this hymen usually gets a small opening during perinatal life. Genital duct in the female. The genital duct is developed from, you can see these are the mesonephric tubule, mesonephric duct and paramesonephric duct. Now the mesonephric tubule will degenerate and the most cranial portion will give rise to the epiphoron, and the other will give the caudal portion paraophoron. The mesonephric duct will also degenerate and the most apical portion or a cranial portion of it will be found in the epiphoron, and the caudal portion of it will find either in the uterine wall or in the vagina, and it will called as a Cartener cyst. The paramesonephric duct. The paramesonephric duct consists of three portions: vertical portion, horizontal portion, and the vertical portion. The vertical portion here, the first and second, will give rise to the uterine tube or fallopian tube. This is the fallopian tube that open into the abdominal cavity. The third part, which is fused with the other side, this side fused with the other side, the two paramesonephric duct fused, and they will give rise to the uterine canal, and this will later on give rise to the corpus and cervix of the uterus. The vagina will be formed by two portions. The first portion will be the caudal portion of the paramesonephric duct, and the second portion will be formed from the urogenital sinus, and this will give rise to the vagina. Now look here, this is the indefinite stage. In the indefinite stage, we see the Mullerian duct and the Wolffian duct. In the stage of differentiation, the Wolffian duct will develop in the male and form the epididymis, vas deferens, and the seminal vesicle and ejaculatory duct. In the female, it will degenerate, while the Mullerian ducts will develop in the female and will give rise to the oviducts, the uterus, cervix, and upper portion of the vagina. There are defects and anomalies occurs in the uterine and in the uterus and vagina. The first is called uterus didivolus or double uterus. Here you can see that the two paramesonephric duct will fail to fuse completely, and each duct will form a separate uterus, and each one will have a separate vagina. Look here, there is 2 uterus, 2 cervix, and 2 vagina. In the uterus bicornis, there is double uterus and double cervix, but there is single vagina. Look here, this is 1 uterus, other uterus, 1 cervix, other cervix, and there is single vagina, and this is called uterus bicornis. Other abnormality is called bicornuate uterus. In bicornuate uterus, the uterus is single but has 2 separate horns, and this is due to improper development of the fundus. Last abnormality, there is mild indentation at the middle, and this is called uterus arcuate, and this is less severe form of abnormality. So anomalies of the uterus, it results from the first, where there are 2 paramesonephric ducts fail to fuse completely, and there will be formation of double uterus with double cervix and double vagina. And there are another case where there are double uterus, double cervix, and single vagina, which is called uterus bicornis. In bicornuate uterus, the uterus is single, but there are 2 separate horns. In the uterus arcuate, this is very mild abnormality, and there are only mild indentation in the middle of the uterus. Another abnormality is called Cartener cyst, and the Cartener cyst, it is a vestigial remnant of the mesonephric or Wolffian ducts in the female. Absent vagina, this is due to failure of canalization of the vaginal plate that occur at the 5th month of the fetal development. Another abnormality is called imperforated hymen, when the continuity between the vaginal lumen and the cavity of the urogenital sinus is not established. Now, we will come to describe the development of external genital organs. Also, there is indifferent stage and there is different stage. In the indifferent stage of external genital organs, during this stage, both the male and female will show the same organs. Now, look here. You can see this is the cloaca, if you remember. There are the urorectal septum that will divide it into urogenital sinus and rectum. And here this will be the cloacal membrane. During the 3rd week of development, the cloacal membrane is surrounded by 2 folds, and these 2 folds are called cloacal fold. Cranially, these folds, they are unite and they will form a small tubercle, and this is tubercle called genital tubercle. Caudally, the cloacal membrane will be divided into 2 parts, which are the urogenital membrane anteriorly and the anal membrane will be posterior. The cloacal folds are then subdivided into 2 folds. The first is called urethral fold anteriorly, and the second will be called anal fold posteriorly. In the meantime, there will be appearance of another swelling on each side of the urethral fold, and these are called genital swelling. So in the indifferent stage of external genitalia, there are cloacal membrane, which is divided into 2 parts, the urogenital membrane anteriorly and the anal membrane posteriorly. And the cloacal fold will be subdivided into urethral fold anteriorly and anal fold posteriorly. And then there will be appearance of genital swelling on each side of the urethral fold. Now, differentiation of external genitalia. The first in the external genitalia in the male. Now, the differentiation of external genitalia. External genitalia in the male. There are 3 things. Number 1, in the male, under the effect of the androgen, which is secreted by the fetal testes, the genital tubercle will be elongated and it will form the phallus. The second, here there are the urethral fold. The urethral fold will be fused at midline and they will be forming the penile urethra. The third changes, the genital swelling which are present on each side of the urethral fold and will form now the scrotal swelling, and each swelling then make up half of the scrotum. Development of the external genitalia in the female. In the female, estrogen will stimulate development of the external genitalia. So again, here also 3 things happen. First, the genital tubercle will form the clitoris. Second, the urethral fold will not fuse as in the male, but they develop into the labia minora. The genital swelling will enlarge and form the labia majora. Now, just to revise the the external genital development, you can see here there are indifferent stage and there is different stage of differentiation. In the indifferent stage, there are three things. Number one, there are urethral fold. Number two, there are genital tubercle. And number three, there are genital swelling. They are same present in the male and in the female. Later on, under the effect of androgen, there will be development of the male external genitalia. The genital tubercle will give rise to the phallus in the male, and in the female, under the effect of estrogen, it will give clitoris. The urethral fold in the male, they will be fused, and they will give rise to the penile urethra. In the female, they will not fuse, and they will form the labia minora. The genital swelling in the male, they will form the scrotum, while in the female, they will give rise to the labia majora. So the three portions which are present in the indifferent stage, the genital tubercle, will give rise later in the different stage to phallus in the male, clitoris in the female. The urethral fold will give rise to the penile urethra in the male and labia minora in the female. The genital swelling will give rise to the scrotum in the male, labia majora in the female. Now, developmental defect in the male genitalia. There are two developmental defects occur in the male genitalia, which is called the hypospadias and epispadias. The hypospadias occur due to incomplete fusion of the urethral folds, and this will result in an abnormal opening of the urethra, and this occurs along the inferior or ventral aspect of the penis. Here you can see that the opening occurs on the ventral aspect of the penis. There is a rare abnormality, and instead of this, the urethral meatus is found on the dorsum of the penis. So the two developmental abnormality of the urethral opening, either it will be present on the ventral aspect and it is called hypospadias, or it is present on the dorsum aspect of the penis and it is called epispadias. Disorders of sexual development. Gonadal dysgenesis. It is a defective embryonic development of the gonads, and the loss of the germ cell will result in hypoplastic gonads. An example of this is Turner syndrome. In the Turner syndrome, the female will have ovaries, and the ovaries are hypoplastic and very ancestric ovaries. Another disorder is hermaphroditism. In the hermaphroditism, both testicular and ovarian tissue is present. In the true hermaphroditism, the gonads and external genitalia of both sex. That is to say, the gonads, for example, is ovary. The external genitalia will be that of the female. And in case of the pseudo-hermaphroditism, if the gonads are ovary, the external genitalia is that of the male. This is my last lectures in the development of the genitourinary system. I hope you understand the subject. If you have any question, please write on the Google class and I will answer you. Good luck and have a nice day. Thank you.